Sorry, get used to this mic here. We're going to call the committee meeting to order. Before we get started, I have to read an introduction. The Design Adjustment Committee's purpose is to establish clear and measurable review criteria for the consideration of major deviations from the city's technical standards and specification manual. The committee does not consider housing type, cost of the proposed unit, occupants, building material, unit size, number of bedrooms, or the architectural design of the structures. These hearings are quasi-judicial evidentiary hearings. That means it's like a court hearing, and the committee's decisions are constrained by the standards in the ordinance and based upon the facts presented. All variance requests require a 4/5 vote of the committee to grant the variance. Appeals of the Design Adjustment Committee decisions are to Superior Court. The parties in these cases are entitled to an impartial board. If a board member has a fixed opinion on the matter, a financial interest in the outcome, a close relationship with an affected person, or has had any ex parte communication about the matter, please disclose that information to determine if a recusal is necessary. City staff will introduce the proposed project to the committee, and committee members may ask questions. The applicant may present additional information about the project, and members may ask questions. If anyone wishes to provide evidence at today's hearing, witnesses must sign in the clipboard at the front of the room and be sworn in. Because witnesses are to provide sworn testimony, please focus on the facts and standards, not personal preference or opinion. When a witness comes forward to give testimony, please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and speak clearly. At this time, staff will administer the oath for all individuals who intend to provide witness testimony.
If I could have all staff, applicants, and members of the public who may wish to speak this afternoon to please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from October the 18th meeting. Has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes? If so, any discussion or a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor of approval of the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. First item on the agenda, or the only item on the agenda, is 4201 Maple Avenue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the DAC. As first cases for 4201 Maple Avenue. The property itself contains approximately 0.33 acres. There is the proposed construction of a cross-section and improvements within the Maple Avenue right-of-way. The property itself is zoned R10, medium-density residential. It's currently vacant. The applicant has proposed a number of adjustments from the technical standards for the proposed improvements within Maple Avenue, which is shown on your screen. These are the relief from the minimum tangent length for a roadway, the relief from the minimum standards for a roadway radius, relief from the minimum standards for residential driveways, and relief from the minimum standards for a minor street. The site, 4201 Maple frontage along this unimproved portion of Maple Avenue, which is a public right-of-way. This is unimproved and it's 33 feet wide. The proposal includes the construction of a minor street with a non-standard cross-section to provide access to 4201 Maple Avenue from 43rd Street. The requested adjustments are listed in the case summary. I'll just briefly cover them. The first request, the relief from maximum length of a private driveway, the minimum requirement being 100 feet. The second request being the radius of a roadway, that minimum requirement being 35 feet. The third request, the minimum standard for a residential driveway. The applicant's proposing a non-standard driveway connection, which I believe is a previous technical standard. And then finally, the non-standard cross-section includes about 5 separate items that we've broken down in the case summary. The requirement for sidewalks being 5 feet wide along both sides of the street, a minimum 20 feet of pavement width, the typical crown cross slope, the right-of-way itself being 40 feet wide. It's currently 33 feet wide. And then the pavement offset within the right-of-way is proposed as well. So I've got those listed in the case summary. If the DAC elects to approve these adjustments, staff has recommended the following conditions listed in the case summary. Fairly standard conditions there on page 5 of your case summary. That concludes my presentation. I'd like to enter this case summary into the record. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. The applicant's here as well.
Patrick, maybe just a point of clarification, maybe for my benefit. Is there something in the standard that requires this to be a public road, a 500-foot-long minor street with all the public utilities to serve one resident? It's essentially a driveway, right?
Right. Yeah. Public right-of-way that's currently along Maple Avenue. It's currently unimproved. So for further access for any lot along there, they would have to have an improved access to those lots.
Even if there's already a private gravel drive there now?
I believe so, yes.
Does other staff want to clarify? Because I can probably answer that question, but I don't know if it's most appropriate coming from me. I don't know. I mean, doesn't any residence or structure have to have access from a public street?
Correct.
Yeah.
Has to be an improved public or private street or private access easement. In this case, we have an unimproved public right-of-way, so it would have to be built to standard or, as they're proposing, non-standard improvement in front of you today.
And it does serve other residents potentially, not just the one it could serve? Other
Potentially,
parcels?
yes, there are other parcels along that unimproved portion of Maple Avenue that would potentially be served by this as well.
Okay. Thank you. And I guess a lot of this centers around, the hardship centers around, there is obviously a reduced right-of-way width, but it centers around the existing trees. And I'll ask the applicant the same question. Any staff taking a look at those trees to see what their condition is?
I would defer to the applicant ultimately
Okay.
on that. They've done the tree survey, so it's included in your packet, so I'd ultimately defer to them on that.
Got it. Thank you.
I just had one question. The adjustment, would that mean that every other property that intends to utilize this would also need a DAC waiver to the driveway in order to attach? Or would this be for the whole street then, that if they needed to attach, they could utilize that driveway apron?
I'm ultimately going to defer to the applicant. I believe they're requesting for the existing driveways, if there's some existing
Okay.
along the unimproved portion. I'll ultimately defer to the applicant if that's what they intended to do.
Okay, thank you.
Pat, do you know if there are any plans for Maple Avenue to be, that looks like the terminus of Maple Avenue right-of-way. Do you know of, are you aware of any reason to think that Maple Avenue would continue to 41st Street? Or I think that's 41st Street.
It is 41st Street.
Okay.
I'm not aware of any plans to continue that.
Any other questions for Pat?
Yeah, a question for you around
Sir, we'll have a public comment period that you'll have an opportunity to speak at that time. It's not really a question and answer at this point. Okay,
Thank you.
Does the applicant wish to speak?
Hey there, Luke Minas, Stroud Engineering. applicant. I don't have a whole lot to add. I'm relying mostly on all the stuff that Pat's put together. I appreciate that, but I would like to answer any questions you've got. Specifically from traffic, I believe that the property to the west of what's shown as a right-of-way is a private lot, so any acquisition of that would be eminent domain, I suppose. Probably wouldn't make the headlines this week, though. Sewer and water, we had pre-TRC. Jeff Theberge had commented on that, so these plans reflect his comments from that. Of course, I've had follow-up discussion pre-TRC and afterwards with fire, and the plans reflect where I believe we left off with that. That was most of the preparation that went into these plans. Felt like that getting fire and utilities back to this lot was the primary issue, and wanted to make sure we'd at least cleared that bar. But with that, I'll take any additional questions that you have.
I'll ask you the same question I asked Pat. A lot of what I'm seeing is a lot of the hardship and site constraints come from trying to avoid the trees in and adjacent to the right-of-way. Have those trees been evaluated? I mean, are they in good shape? What?
The gorilla in the room is, I think it's a 22-inch laurel oak multi-stemmed. I've got reported about a third of the way back. That's the main thing we're trying to dodge and keep intact. Not had an arborist out there to look at it, but from the extent that I'm familiar with those things, it was in pretty good shape. It's a good-looking tree. There's some other smaller trees along the entrance that we're unable to avoid, and I've not been out there since, I believe it's Adam Rogers. There's a new parcel that was created in the last couple months, and there's a house being framed up right now, and it may have even affected some of those trees along the right-of-way on the corner of 43rd and Maple. And he's probably got a driveway coming in off the back. It may be at the existing location, but it probably warrants another little bit of survey work to make sure what we're showing is existing is existing.
Okay. And then, I guess to clarify, Abby, earlier, your request for the non-standard driveway design with the, no vertical curb and the 3-foot flares, is that intended to apply to just the existing structures that you're sort of reconnecting to this road? Or is it intended to apply to those plus the applicant's structure, or all of the homes along this road?
With the driveway aprons.
Yeah.
The driveway aprons were suggested by engineering at pre-TRC, understanding that the existing driveways and the whole Maple Avenue right-of-way, for that matter, the improved portions of it are gravel. Engineering did not want to see us just run through there with a new ribbon of asphalt and a 12-inch header curb and then have gravel tracked onto that roadway, and felt like a small concrete apron. In the case of one of the adjoining property owners, they've already got a concrete apron that I've pretty much modeled my detail after. It's sort of a city driveway apron looking thing. And that's just to kind of establish those driveway locations, and certainly we can work with those adjoining property owners if they need to be shifted a couple feet one way or another, but that's just the survey driveway locations I've got.
Okay. And is there a particular, I guess, justification for the 3-foot flare versus the 5, which I believe is standard?
On that driveway?
Yeah.
No, I can certainly adjust that. Again, I think I kind of modeled after the driveway apron that was already out there, and if that needs to be changed on the flare, I can do that.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for Luke?
Luke, on the 10-foot section width, that seems to be the real pinch point, right?
That's correct. I mean, and that's what discussions with fire, I think that was the compromise that they were willing to entertain. Had a few months to sleep on that, so maybe we come back with a different decision, but that was the one area that I was trying to minimize the asphalt width, get as far away from that laurel oak as I could, and really kind of mirror the existing gravel section in that location. So that's it. That's the...
I think what my concern is it's a pinch point for traffic, but also for utilities. And you've shown the wet utilities, but you haven't shown or addressed any of the dry utilities. And would those then be under the pavement too, since you're trying to save the trees? Electric, gas, telephone, fiber?
That's correct. We're going to try to get everything plowed in as narrow a footprint, especially in that area right there. And then once we get beyond that, we're able to utilize that full 33-foot right-of-way.
Are you going to put it under the pavement? Because you're trying to avoid
Yeah.
excavating beyond the pavement,
That's,
right?
that's correct.
So that's going to be a lot of stuff in that pinch point.
Let me get the sheet. This also got your utilities shown, so I would expect to see them go in in that section between the water and the sewer, in the center of the pavement, in that particular location.
You just may want to be aware that, it still requires a CFPUA plan review, and you'll probably get some comments on that.
Understood.
In dealing with the pinch point that he was referring to, because of the laurel oak, is that what you're basically trying to protect? How much does the span of that oak come across that 16-foot pinch point?
I detailed that following up discussion from, I guess it was in October, on sheet 2. I've actually got sections, typical cross sections of the road that have that existing tree branch, or it's really one of the main stems of the tree that extend over the road, and dimensioned where you've got your 13.
Yeah,
Here
so
we are.
It looks like the canopy.
I've got a big one on the screen here if you prefer. This detail in the top right corner, that's based on a survey, and I've dimensioned the location along the right-of-way where you've got your full 13.5-foot overhead clearance. So you've got .12.5 feet at that tree branch.
So for the remainder of that cross-section to the left, how much of a vertical encroachment is there? I mean, how high is the branch at the edge of the header curb?
It's well over what you're going to encounter with a passenger vehicle. I don't have that information. I'd have to go out and look at that again.
Well, you just kind of answered it.
16-foot, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so somebody's not going to hit it with a pickup truck, but an ambulance or a fire truck probably would. if they had-
Ambulance, fire, your UPS truck is going to hug the north side of that right-of-way going in there. They'll have 12.5 foot of width to get in. If that needs to be striped, some signage in place, I don't know how to address that, but again, the goal is to try to keep the stem of that laurel oak in place.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions for Luke? I'm sure we'll have some additional questions. We do have to get the public hearing open, and then we'll have some additional questions as we consider the variances. Thank you. At this time, I'll open the public hearing. Anybody from the public who wishes to speak, please step to the podium.
Good afternoon. My name is John Bernhard Thurston. I live at 1030 43rd Street, and that is adjacent. That's the first, well, on the map it was the first property on the right as you enter Maple Avenue from 43rd Street. My wife and I have lived there since 1992. Actually, we first lived at 1030 43rd Street, which backs up to Maple Avenue. Fronts on Wrightsville Avenue, and we bought 1030 43rd Street, and we have a garage apartment behind it, which oddly has a Maple Avenue water address. Now, we moved there in 1992, and as I recall, in you may correct me if I'm wrong, and I think in the 1970s, the city annexed that part of town. And in 1992, when we moved there, the alley was a rutted, almost impassable, mud-filled alley. And I laid down marl. After calling the city in 1992, I asked if they were going to pave it. They said no. There were no plans to pave that street. And this is after it was annexed. So I had it paved to a minimal degree and put down gravel, number 57 rock, I think it was. And we've maintained it to this day. And two other properties, well, there's 4209 Wrightsville Avenue, also the corner properties, two of them at 43rd and Wrightsville use that alley, and so does a garage apartment behind 4207. That's the access for that. We appreciate the applicant's concern about maintaining the character of the neighborhood because it's a historic area. It's Edgewood, adjacent to Audubon. We think that's a very special area and hate to see it diminished, especially with the tree in question, which is a beautiful tree, but we do understand there are constraints necessary for emergency vehicles. One of the biggest concerns we have, can we go back to the other slide showing the whole roadway down to the prospective lot being questioned? Oh, there you go. Our concern is that's the furthest lot behind the row of houses on 41st Street. It's what's happening in between. My residence is here, the very first one on the right. We do not want this to lead to spot zoning, as what happened on Cedar Avenue with R5. This is going to be a very narrow roadway. We appreciate that because that introduces traffic calming and think that's proper in this context. And on both sides, I think that's going to be concerned as to what's going in there. Is it single-family residence, or is it going to be residences, or will it be more than that? Now, my neighbor and I at 4209 Wrightsville Avenue Mark Saunier owns 4209. He is out of town, but he and I agree and maintain that, number one, there should be no curb and gutter. The question is, where does the gutter take the water to? The inverted section of the roadway we think is a bad idea because it's going to carry water to 43rd Street. That's the biggest problem here is drainage. We have serious drainage problems on 43rd Street with storms. I've been flooded 3 times in my garage apartment, the lower level, because of rising water that has no place to go. The ditches on both sides of 43rd Street carry water from here down to a big retention pond that is overgrown. It's poorly maintained by the city. I personally pay for the ditches, at least on the left-hand side, the west side, to be weeded every summer. I pay it out of my pocket because we can't depend upon the city to maintain it. Water just does not flow during storms. If it's a heavy storm, the water backs up and it comes right back into the residence and floods us. So if we're going to develop Maple Avenue, again, where's the water going to? Where's it being sent to? If it's being sent to 43rd Street, then it's already in a clogged situation. It's just going to back up and flood us. So this has to be addressed somehow. And again, we want the road with narrow, and also my neighbor and I both request that it be pervious concrete, if anything, so the water has somewhere to percolate before it gets to 43rd Street to help with the storm problems. I think if this is considered for any approval, a critical thing, in addition to the drainage, is to get down to the end of the street to the retention pond and clean it out. Since the city put it in there, I don't know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it just is not maintained as a thicket, And it would make a wonderful pocket park to be an amenity to the neighborhood, but the main thing is to have it visible back there so you can see what the level of growth is in terms of the vegetation that's going to inhibit any kind of drainage. But we need to have clean drainage going down there. Lastly, I want to say that if the city's in a creative mood to solve this whole question of getting access to these properties, which I think need to have access, the property owners certainly deserve that, I would suggest coming off of Wrightsville Avenue with one of these vacant lots and coming through there with some kind of creative, adaptation to get access there and get emergency vehicles back there. I did have a garage fire back in 2016, which burned down my 3-car garage on my property. The fire trucks did have a hard time getting there because of the road, the alley. They couldn't get a truck back there very easily, and the hose, the hose is out there, the fire hydrant is out at the corner of Wrightsville Avenue and 43rd Street. And they had to run a hose all the way back there, so that took extra time. So having a hydrant back there is certainly going to help. And lastly, I want to say, is there's ditches here and here going to Wrightsville Avenue that do not drain. We have no idea where those ditches drain to. They will fill up, especially the one at the corner will fill up with water after a storm, and it has nowhere to go. We've had the city out there numerous times, 3 or 4 times. No one knows where that ditch drains to. So that's another part of the puzzle, the drainage puzzle to solve before any, I think, development can move forward. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else from the public wish to speak?
Hey there, my name's Adam Rogers. I live in a house at 1034 43rd Street, so right across the side of Maple Avenue from Bernie, who just spoke. My concern would be, I'd echo kind of what he said. I'd be concerned with spot zoning down the road. This is a public, unimproved road, and they're requesting exemptions from even like minimum standards for a residential driveway. And so if this was to be kind of developed into something more than a single-family home, I think that would potentially cause problems. I am worried about the flooding impact. I don't have as much experience with living there as Bernie, so I'd have concerns with the ditches flooding and the water from this new improved road not having anywhere to go. Thanks.
Thank you.
Sir, you weren't sworn in, so I'm going to need you to raise your right hand. Sure. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Doesn't pay to be late, does it? My name's Alvin Rogers, his dad. Anyway, I own, well, this would be Bernie's lot here. Adam owns here, I own the house on the corner of 43rd and Wrightsville. Owned it for a long time. Anyway, Wrightsville Avenue used to be a 4-lane road, or a 2-lane road, until they widened it up and brought it almost to 43rd Street. And after, I didn't connect the dots, but sometime after that, when we began to have rains, that ditch at 43rd Street literally fills up on both sides. And I don't remember who he was, but years ago, there was an engineer that did some checking, and the ditches used to drain to Kerr Avenue. When they widened the road, for whatever reason, they closed off one because they thought our water drained the other way. But the problem with our drainage is it has to go uphill towards Cedar Avenue now. And so it doesn't drain, it percolates into the ground. So drainage is a problem there. With regard to the road, the idea of a pervious surface might be the most practical thing so that we can at least utilize what drainage that we have. And that piece of land back there is big enough for extra housing. And so is this road that we're putting in now supposed to take care of any other units? The city's been putting in some high-density multifamily in single-family areas now. And if a greater density is put in there, what impact will that have on the road? Will whoever adds more units in there have to upgrade that road, or are we stuck with what is being put there? It makes one wonder. Well, unless y'all got any questions of me, I'm done.
Thank you, sir. I think at this point it's been 10 minutes. Did you wish to speak too as well, sir? Okay, sure, by all means. Sir, can you step to the mic? Yeah, sorry.
I live across the street on 3rd Street. My property goes to Maple Avenue on the other side of 43rd, okay? And the only thing I have to say is that everybody else is contributed information about the poor drainage. It's beyond that. It is, not only does it not drain, but we've had people out there several times from the city and the state to look at it. And in both times, city and state, they said it's not our problem, it's the others. You know, so it needs to be dealt with, because when the water starts coming off this road, this new road, and it's going to go into the ditches where they have not done any work as far as cleaning it up to get that whatever drainage there is open, just like the other gentleman said. So, but it is a problem.
Please. It's not really a question and answer thing, but if you've got anything else to add, I'm happy to hear it.
I'm sorry, this just came up from the comments. Are we at that point yet with engineering as to where, with this proposal, what kind of line is being put in? What kind of water line, sewage line drainage? Where does it plan to go to? So the question about the pervious surface and the curb and gutter, where's it going to, I think is being maybe answered with that. Is this water or rainwater going to be sent to Wrightsville Avenue? Or what's the answer to that question? Thank you.
No.
Sorry, this isn't a question and answer session. They're not allowed to answer questions from the public.
But the concern is noted. Thank you. Let me go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing first. And then, you please go ahead.
I'll try to run back. Did a poor job of describing in my plans or in my introduction. First off, and I met Mr. Thurston on site one day. I was out there kind of exploring around, looking at some stuff out there, and had a chat with him. And I appreciate his insight on the drainage and everyone else's. It's been a tough year to confirm what stuff does when it floods, because we just haven't had any kind of flooding rainfall events. But that was pretty much what I was seeing, was that the ditches out there don't have any kind of real defined outfall. What I've got proposed extending through the project, through the Maple Avenue right-of-way, is really an extension of what's already in 43rd Street, which is a 12-inch drainage system right now. All the driveway culverts from Wrightsville Avenue up to, I guess that's Cedar, to our north. And they're all essentially at the same invert, not a lot of variation there. So that's just an extension of that system and tying into it. One thing that I would suggest as a possible solution, if the city's maybe entertaining coming in the future, a year or 10 years, whenever, upsizing any of the drainage in 43rd Street or even in Wrightsville Avenue, be happy to upsize what I'm putting in. For the time being, it would be a 18 or 24-inch pipe draining to a 12-inch system, but it would begin to function better once the improvements went in along 43rd Street. So that's one thing just to throw out there. If it needs to be a condition, we'll address that. To the questions of the other utilities being extended in Maple, a 6-inch water main, which is sufficient to support a fire hydrant. At some point along the way, it necks down to a 2-inch water main, which is enough to supply water to 20 houses, much more than we'd ever see back there. And then the sewer line is a 12-inch, excuse me, an 8-inch gravity main, 8-inch being the minimum size for a public gravity main, and that extends all the way to the end of the road. Again, I think that's what I got out of that. If anybody has any questions, whatever happens here after the meeting, I'm happy as a courtesy to speak with you about what we're planning to do. And that's it. I'll leave that to the board now. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a number of variances to consider. I will say there's been a lot of discussion about drainage, and I certainly can appreciate that, working in engineering myself. So, Pat, can you clarify, this has not been to TRC yet, or it has?
This has been to pre-TRC.
So it still has to go to formal TRC, or does it not? Because I don't know whether this type of improvement would trigger formal TRC.
This would trigger.
Okay, so typically those technical issues are dealt with at the formal TRC review. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I guess where I'm going with that is we're here to sort of discuss the variances from our normal standards, of which they have several. And I'm not trying to discount any drainage issues. I can definitely appreciate that. And the scenario for pervious pavement, I mean, that's certainly not something that is typical in the city, but the suggestion is certainly a decent suggestion. I mean, that could be potentially dealt with at the TRC level. So just because we don't necessarily talk as much about it, doesn't mean that we aren't conscious of it. It will be dealt with as part of the technical review at the TRC level. So where do we start with these? I think I'd just like to kind of hear anybody's general concerns with the proposal before we dig into each individual variance.
I got a question for staff too. Pat, is there any reason a single lot cannot be serviced by a public alley only, or does it have to be a public street?
I believe the code section refers to a public street or improved street, approved.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to mention that as well. Brian, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think the alley access is only allowed in the CBD, if I'm correct.
Corporate limits?
The 45 corporate limits, okay.
Yeah.
And the only reason I mentioned that was I know alleys have lesser standards than roadways, and I thought that might be, if it were an alley.
And that's a great point that I had as well, because what is being proposed is a lot more similar to the alley standard than it is a minor street standard. But as I'm understanding it, the intent is for this to be used as a minor street and not an alley. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And again, back to staff, there was a concern noted by the public, and I had that same concern, is if this is developed as a street, there's no, I mean, any of the other undeveloped parcels adjacent to this could build or subdivide as permitted by code. So it would be, could potentially serve many more residents than just the applicant.
Right, yeah, potentially, if, as long as they meet the zoning district requirements, yes.
Okay. Any other concerns from staff for discussion? I know one thing that concerned me is, you know, every street standard that we've got has sidewalks, and they're not proposing any sidewalks. I can appreciate the drainage concerns. I can appreciate the site constraints. They're definitely there with the narrow right-of-way and the tree and the drainage. But, you know, if this is improved, there's the potential for a number of residents adjacent to this street, and there's no sidewalk to serve them. And I don't feel like that's a public service, personally. That's my opinion. But got to balance that with the site constraints. Any thoughts?
Chief, from the fire perspective, is there any concern over the 20-foot or even a 16-foot width? It sounds like it's already been discussed a little bit, but.
Yeah, it sounds like it's been discussed in a preliminary thing from the technical, but in keying in of future development there and increasing the number of potential traffic, I'd be very concerned with that narrow roadway trying to get in and out with fire apparatus if we've got multiple families down there. But again, it's been apparently discussed in any more of the technical stuff would be handled by TRC.
Okay. I'll just say, in general, I feel like this facility would work for where it is. I do agree that it sure would be nice to find a way to get some kind of sidewalk in there. I mean, if the roadway's offset through the pinch area, could we offset the roadway through the entire area and provide room on one side or the other to provide that sidewalk? But essentially, with it not being a through street, I don't have much concern over the narrowness or the other variances being requested.
Yeah, I don't have any concerns with the narrowness of the road, personally either. I think that contrary to maybe the public opinion, I see the inverse crown as probably a movement over the standard with respect to drainage, because you're only putting one pipe on the ground. A normal crown road has pipes on both sides, which will run utilities closer to the trees. You know, so I feel like I can support the inverse crown suggestion. Not sure that that necessarily needs a variance, but it's been applied for, so we'll take some action on it. But it's for me, the biggest issue is, does that one tree warrant effectively elimination of sidewalk? We're balancing one 27-inch tree, which, you know, we're trying to save trees. We're balancing one tree against, you know, a pinch point for fire and a pinch and no sidewalks. That's kind of what it boils down to for me.
Yeah, and just kind of going off of that, the comprehensive plan section 6.3 in policies urban forest. Tree preservation shall be a priority in developments where significant clusters of trees can be protected from meaningful impact and appearance. Planting of street trees with frequent spacing should be a priority where the density of buildings, infrastructure, and required grading makes the preservation of existing trees unfeasible. So I agree with what you're saying. I think that the comp plan favors connectivity. It also favors, like it talks about, clusters of trees. Is this necessarily a cluster of trees? Or is this just one 22-inch tree that we may have heard is already being impacted by existing development, has the opportunity to be significantly impacted if an emergency emergency vehicle needs to get access, even a UPS truck. To me, that causes concerns over whether that tree is being saved or we're prolonging its death. Does it make more sense for the tree to be relocated? Does it make more sense to have a payment in lieu for a tree to be planted elsewhere that can benefit the community in a different way? That's kind of where I'm seeing that we could have that sidewalk, we could have the road that helps them with safety and everything. But I'm not necessarily certain that this tree is really meeting that intent with what they're proposing.
And I think furthermore, one tree is dictating a lot of accommodations, but the amount of land disturbance that's going to occur to put in the storm drains, the water and the sewer, the root damage that occurs to the tree, maybe by the time everything is constructed, the tree's not going to survive anyway.
Yeah.
All very good points. And, I think you brought up a good point in your question with Luke, is the non-municipal utilities. I mean, there is no non-municipal easement, I don't believe, in this location, so those utilities also have to be crowded into this same narrow right-of-way. Now, there may not be that many because of the limited number of residents here, but I think you've got a lot of site constraints here, and it's a lot to accommodate, for one tree. Now, that said, speaking strictly of sidewalk, I don't think that because of the, doesn't extend any further sidewalk on both sides, which is part of our street standard, minor street standard, I don't know that sidewalk on both sides is necessary. But I feel like we would be doing we wouldn't be doing our jobs if we didn't at least try and get sidewalk in on one side.
I would agree with that, particularly since there's other vacant lots that could be developed.
Yeah, exactly, right. And subdivided. I mean,
Yeah.
looking at it, those lots that front on Maple, is Wrightsville the next street down? It is, right? Yeah. To the south? Yeah, so the lots that sort of span from Maple to Wrightsville could potentially subdivide
Yeah.
and now have a lot that fronts on Maple. And there's a large lot, just adjacent to the applicant, and then another one adjacent to that's undeveloped. And all of those presumably will develop someday. And, if they don't trigger the sidewalk improvement themselves, then this is really the opportunity to get sidewalk. And I just don't,
Yep.
I don't see one tree being worth all of those concessions personally. I love trees.
agree.
I really will do my best to save a tree, and maybe there's still a way, but that's kind of where I'm at. Speaking to the other waivers, I can definitely see the need for the header curb, placing this sort of on grade to be able to minimize the access problems and drainage issues from the adjacent properties. So they've got existing access points to those adjoining properties. And if you put a curb in there, you've created a vertical, obstruction. And, when you're building a new neighborhood, you can do that. But when you're trying to, sort of infill a roadway into an existing site, I think that the header curb, I can certainly understand why they're proposing that and could support that. So the non-standard section with the header curb and the inverse crown, I could see, and it would carry some additional benefit, I think, even if we didn't save the tree, to save the other adjoining trees, that may not be, maybe not the 22-inch oak, but the others that are in there to avoid more significant impacts to the character of the area. So how do we navigate these variances? We need to take some action.
Just want to take them one at a time?
Yeah.
Sort
Yep.
of at the top?
Well, I guess a question for the committee is I don't know how you guys feel, but would we still, if we assume that the 22-inch oak has to potentially go, would the narrowing still be an issue? Which would, the first one, which is the tangent, would that go away? Would we ask that they maintain the 20-foot width? I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with that, because again, it goes back to a conversation about the sidewalks. That would change one of their requests as well, saying that there's no sidewalks provided, number 4, if we wanted to condition that. So perhaps this is maybe where we ask the applicant if they would like to proceed today with a vote, or if they would be willing to have a conversation about the design, if the chair would like.
No, I think that's a good question. Luke, I know that's kind of a lot to throw at the project in a very short amount of time. Do you have any, do you want to maybe step to the podium? Do you have anything to say about any of that? Is there any thoughts you had?
Yeah, I'll at least save a few minutes of item-by-item deliberation with just a few seconds of comments. The oak there, certainly I would not be standing here asking you to neck the road down to 16 feet or put that swag in the road. If it's just to stake the limits of the 33-foot right-of-way and clear it, it's to plow through and can do whatever we need to do inside that 33-foot right-of-way. I think that the reason that the property owner is drawn to that lot with desires to build on that lot is the feel of that neighborhood. It's a really cool place. I would love to have a little home back there off that, not an alley, use the term alley because that's what it is now. It's Hurricane Alley unofficially. I'll take this back to the owner, see how they want to proceed. I think that's probably the right thing to do. I'm hearing you that sidewalk is a must-have for you. I live on a street without sidewalks and do just fine, but I understand that that's in the city's, some of their guiding documents. I need to ask them how they want to proceed if they're going to end up with a 20-foot wide road, no oak tree, and a sidewalk, because that's kind of where I'm hearing this is going.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Yeah, I would love to find some way to keep you from having to come back. So we could table it, I guess, or what can we do? What is the options? Continue it? Continue it to the next meeting, or we could sort of approve and deny the variances as best we can based upon the assumption that the tree is going to go. And then if you can work within that.
Let's table it. If we proceed and the tree, y'all walk out of here with a win. I got to ride the elevator down with these folks here, and then I get done with that meeting, and I got to call the client and let them know where we are. So I don't want to proceed like that. I need to let them know where we stand with that and see what their position is.
Okay. So is your request to continue the item to the next meeting?
Please continue it to the next available. Yep. Thank you.
Okay. So
I just had one question. I know the plans indicate proposed single-family, and I know that came up in the public comments. Is
Yeah,
it
there-
being proposed single-family?
There's no to rezone any of this. I know that the builder probably wants to do a single-family home with a ADU in the backyard. That's what they do, and I expect that that's what they would do here. I've not seen any plans, but no plans to rezone to anything smaller than what you got.
Okay.
Mr. Menas, make a note that our next Design Adjustment Committee meeting is going to be December the 13th,
Okay.
which is a week earlier than normal. It's not the third Wednesday in December due to the holidays. So
That's
just
great
want to
news.
let you know
Yeah.
as far as your timing
Thank you.
for everything.
So we do have to vote to continue the item. Do we need a first and a second and all that? Typical. Okay. Well, I would move to, per the applicant's request, to continue the item to the December meeting based on the discussion presented.
I will second.
Any other discussion? All in favor to continue the item, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. And Amy, I'm assuming that was your, okay, public service announcement that you had requested, you just made. So with that, we are adjourned till the next meeting. Thank you.
And we'll be back in council chambers in
Okay.
December.
Thank you.